In just 10 minutes, Barron Trump interrupted Jasmine Crockett 6 times, convinced power meant silencing her. Instead, she unleashed the truth, dismantling his dynasty's facade in front of millions. Was this the night America saw Jasmine Crockett rise and Barron Trump fall? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The hearing room blazed under merciless white lights, cutting across polished desks like blades. Rows of microphones stood like weapons cameras, zoomed in tight, every lens hunting for weakness. The silence pressed down heavy, thick with tension, like a bomb waiting for its fuse to catch. Jasmine Crockett stepped forward, brown suit, sharp as armor folder, clutched like a blade forged from evidence. Her eyes were steady, her face carved with defiance. She was no rookie. Years as a civil rights attorney had trained her to fight hostile courts and ruthless opponents. Tonight that fire burned brighter. Across the table sat Barron Trump. Young, tall, carrying the swagger of his dynasty, his gaze gleamed with ambition. For him, this was theater. For her, this was war. The subject, America's right to vote. The clash, inevitable. The silence from the opening scene cracked open when Jasmine leaned toward the microphone, her voice steady, every syllable loaded like a bullet. In the last 5 years, hundreds of polling places across Texas have been shut down, she declared, eyes locked on the committee, and the closures have overwhelmingly targeted communities of color and the poor. The numbers rolled off her tongue with precision, not as statistics, but as wounds carved into democracy itself. Each sentence landed sharp and deliberate, and for a moment the room stilled under the weight of her words. Then Barron Trump shifted in his chair, lips curling into a smirk. He slammed down his point of order, cutting through her testimony like a blade. "That's not true," he barked, his young voice heavy with arrogance. "These closures are nothing more than election security measures, protecting democracy, not suppressing it." The gallery erupted in whispers. Reporters craned forward, pens scratching furiously. Cameras clicked in rapid bursts, capturing the spark of battle igniting. Jasmine paused, exhaled slowly, and nodded as if she had anticipated the ambush all along. She did not falter. She pressed on. The interruptions kept coming, each one faster, sharper, more invasive. Within 10 minutes, Barron had shattered the flow of her testimony 6 separate times. First, he scoffed that she was misrepresenting legal precedent, accusing her of twisting case law to suit her agenda. "Your citations are wrong," he sneered. "You're misleading this committee." Second, he jabbed at her evidence itself, calling the data incomplete, accusing her of cherry-picking numbers to create a false narrative. Third, his voice dripped with condescension as he mocked her terminology. "Voter intimidation. That's sensationalism, Congresswoman. This is security, not fear." Each line was calculated, each jab meant to destabilize. The fourth strike came harsher, Barron's tone shifting from disdain to accusation. "You're confusing legal poll watching with intimidation," he snapped, leaning forward like a predator. "One is a safeguard. The other is illegal. Do not conflate them." Gas rippled quietly through the staffers seated nearby. Jasmine raised her chin, her notes steady in front of her, her expression giving nothing away. She answered only with a calm, "Senator, please allow me to finish. I will address every point." But the fifth interruption roared over her words, Barron's voice booming now. He declared that the Constitution itself limited federal authority. "You cannot let Washington dictate state elections," he said, his tone dripping with the confidence of someone who believed the chamber was his stage. By the sixth interruption, the room was boiling. Barron slammed his hand on the desk for emphasis, declaring that the entirety of Jasmine's testimony was nothing more than a partisan performance to justify a radical federal takeover. His words cut sharp, echoing against the wood-paneled walls. Staffers exchanged uneasy glances. A few members of the committee shifted uncomfortably in their seats. From the back, flashes of cameras bathed the moment in relentless light. Barron leaned back, triumphant smirk etched across his face like a conqueror savoring the crowd. But the reality in the chamber told a different story. The constant interruptions had become a pattern too obvious to ignore. They were no longer oversight, they were harassment, and everyone could feel it. The air thickened, hot and stifling, like an engine ready to overheat. Reporters whispered among themselves, already sketching headlines in their minds. Photographers captured Barron's smirk from every angle, as if archiving arrogance itself. Some members sighed audibly, the sound small but sharp against the silence between Barron's attacks. And yet Jasmine refused to break. Her patience was fraying, but her posture never wavered. She kept her tone even, never letting the interruptions drag her into chaos. Each time Barron tried to cut her down, she delivered the same calm rebuke. Please allow me to finish. All your concerns will be answered in my statement. Her words were steady, but her eyes betrayed the steel hardening behind them. The pressure in the room rose like steam in a locked chamber, everyone sensing that the tension could not hold much longer. Her composure was impressive, but the clock was ticking. With each interruption, Barron was pushing further, testing the boundaries, hungry for control. The audience could feel it. The balance was tipping the air, crackling with the certainty that something explosive was about to break. And Jasmine's silence between his interruptions carried the weight of a fuse, burning shorter and shorter. Because patience, even the strongest, has its limit. Jasmine lowered her folder, letting it rest flat on the desk, like a blade set aside before battle. She inhaled deeply, shoulders rising, then settling as memories flashed sharp and fast. She remembered judges cutting her off, mid-argument rival attorneys, sneering courtrooms where she was underestimated for her age, her race, her gender. She remembered winning anyway because she had studied harder, prepared, longer, believed deeper. That memory was her anchor now. Across from her, Barron tapped his fingers on the table in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Each beat landed like a drum commanding attention, like he was conducting the entire chamber. He leaned back, stretching into his chair, his cold stare fixed on Jasmine, with the hunger of a predator who thought he already owned his prey. His smirk widened, savoring the spectacle, confident his next move would end her. The tension stretched to breaking. Every eye in the room darted between them, waiting for the strike. Would Jasmine endure yet another blow or unleash the counterstrike the air was begging for? The answer was coming. The silence before the explosion could not last. Barron leaned forward, his hand gripping the microphone as it lit red. His voice cut through the chamber like a blade sharp and loud. Mr. Chairman, I cannot allow a fraudulent report like this to become the foundation of national policy. He began, ready to drown her out. The sound rolled across the chamber, echoing off the marble laced with arrogance. He thought the stage was his. He thought the moment was won. But Jasmine Crockett straightened in her seat, then rose, her shoulders square. Her gaze locked like iron. Her voice boomed, commanding and unflinching. Mr. Barron, with all due respect, you have interrupted me 6 times in 10 minutes. It is time you learned what the word respect actually means. The words hit like a gunshot. The room froze. Barron's mouth hung open, but nothing came. From the back, a pen slipped from a staffer's hand and clattered to the floor with startling clarity. No one dared to breathe. Jasmine's eyes never left him. Her tone was cold, precise, merciless. You talk endlessly about voter fraud, she said, her voice slicing each word. So provide evidence, numbers, records, documents. If you cannot, then stop dismissing my data as theater. She pushed the demand across the table like a weapon. Barron blinked, caught flat-footed. He stammered, his lips moving without a plan, his hands fluttering against the papers in front of him. There was nothing there. No proof. No shield. The camera zoomed in, catching every flicker of panic in his eyes. He tried to rally, voice cracking under the weight. Well, the issue is more complicated than raw statistics, he fumbled. But Jasmine struck again before he could find his footing. She lifted the thick folder from her desk and opened it with a crisp snap. Her voice rang out louder than his excuses. This, she declared, holding the folder aloft, is data from your very own 2020 campaign. You relied on early voting. You sent out mail-in ballots. You fought for extended polling hours. Each line landed like a hammer against his chest. Her eyes narrowed, her voice sharpening to a final thrust. If those methods are dangerous, then you were the first to benefit from them. She slammed the folder shut, the sound echoing like a gavel cracking wood. The chamber jolted as if struck by thunder. Reporters scrambled, cameras firing in frenzied bursts, the flashes blinding in their urgency. The gallery erupted in gasps, the tension shattering into chaos. Barron's smirk had vanished, replaced by a stunned pallor that betrayed every ounce of his lost control. The moment was decisive, electric, unforgettable. Jasmine had not just defended herself, she had turned the blade back on him, exposing hypocrisy with his own record. The hearing chamber shook with energy like a courtroom that had just heard a guilty verdict. Every person present knew the balance of power had changed, and the fuse that had burned through minutes of interruptions had finally detonated. The thunderclap from the folder still echoed when Barron leaned back, face flushed, a deep crimson. He tried to smirk to salvage the swagger that had carried him this far, but the mask cracked. His hands shook as he rifled through his paper's pages, flipping uselessly with no salvation inside. The cameras zoomed tighter, capturing every tremor in his fingers. His voice broke as he stammered, "It's not that simple. The situation involves many factors you're ignoring." The words hung in the air, hollow and weak, falling flat in the silence that followed. Jasmine didn't let him finish. Her voice sliced through his excuse like steel. "I asked for evidence," she shot back, eyes locked on him, unwavering. "Not talking points." The sharpness of her tone cut deeper than any statistic. A ripple of tension swept across the room. The gallery held its breath. Even the clicking of cameras faltered, replaced by the heavy pulse of anticipation. Barron froze, caught in the harsh spotlight, and for the first time that evening, he had no words left. The silence was suffocating, thick enough to choke the air. Republican members glanced down their eyes, avoiding the spectacle unraveling before them. Some whispered under their breath, trying to disguise their unease, while others reached for their phones, screens lighting up with notifications from a world outside already ablaze. Social media feeds were exploding, hashtags racing up the charts, clips already being clipped and shared. The hearing wasn't just happening in this room anymore. It was spilling into millions of screens across the country. Then Jasmine turned, her voice rising not to Barron now, but to the entire committee. She held the room in her grip, her words landing heavy and final. "In the last 10 minutes, I've been interrupted 6 times, yet not once has Mr. Barron produced a single shred of evidence. This isn't debate. This is performance." Her declaration detonated in the chamber. A low collective "oh" swelled from the crowd, shock rolling like a wave. Everyone in the room felt it at once. The power had shifted. The wave of gasps still lingered in the chamber when Jasmine reached calmly for another folder. The sound of the clasp snapping open echoed like a warning shot. "This," she announced, sliding the thick stack across the desk, "is not theory. These are court cases, documented violations from Texas." Her tone was ice cold, her delivery surgical, each word weighted like a hammer. The cameras zoomed in again, lenses capturing the moment a witness turned into a prosecutor before the nation's eyes. Every heartbeat in the room seemed to stall. She lifted the first page, her voice steady. An 80-year-old grandmother blocked at the entrance of her polling station by a worker who told her she was at the wrong place. She wasn't. She had voted there for decades. The words hung heavy, sharper than numbers. Reporters scribbled furiously, the story burning itself into their notebooks. Barron shifted in his chair, his smirk fading further with each syllable. The oxygen in the chamber thinned, everyone leaning forward. Jasmine turned to the next sheet, her gaze cutting across the room. A black college student filmed against his will by poll watchers as he tried to cast his vote. He was told his ballot would be questioned, that he could be reported. Her voice never wavered, but the fury behind it was undeniable. Phones lit up around the chamber as staffers texted, knowing these words would detonate across social media within minutes. The young man's story struck like lightning, raw and undeniable, more powerful than any statistic. Then she raised the third example, her voice tightening like a noose. Entire voting machines removed from poor minority-heavy districts, forcing residents to travel more than 20 miles just to cast a ballot. For some, it meant hours on buses, lost wages, and missed shifts. A shiver ran across the room. The details weren't just policy, they were lives laid bare, bruised by systematic obstruction. Barron blinked, lips pressed tight, his earlier bravado dissolving into silence. The stories were unanswerable. The chamber had gone, still suffocated by the truth. Each account echoed through the walls like a verdict. Jasmine lowered the folder with deliberate calm, then raised her head, her eyes locking on Barron with merciless precision. Her words came sharp, final. "Mr. Barron denies these realities, but he relied on these very systems to run his campaign. So where does justice lie, Mr. Barron? With the people's vote or with your personal ambition?" Her voice struck the air like thunder, a question that carried the weight of accusation and the sting of hypocrisy. For a moment, the chamber seemed to crack. On the Democratic side, fists slammed against the table in unison, the pounding rhythm echoing like war drums. The sound reverberated, filling every corner, matching the pulse racing in the gallery. It wasn't applause, it was battle. And everyone in the room knew the tide had turned. The pounding of Democratic fists still echoed when Barron tried to force a smile, but the mask slipped instantly. His lips trembled, his eyes darted unfocused as if searching for an exit that wasn't there. The cameras caught everything, every twitch, every crack in his composure, and the flashes only deepened his humiliation. For a man who had walked in with the swagger of his dynasty, the collapse was brutal, naked, undeniable. The smirk that once seemed permanent was gone, replaced by the stunned face of a boy caught drowning in waters far too deep. The chamber froze again when the chairman raised his gavel. The strike rang out firm and commanding, reverberating through the walls like a judge's final verdict. "Mr. Barron," he said, his voice steady and official, "please allow Representative Crockett to finish." It was the sound of authority reclaiming order, but also a subtle recognition that Barron had lost control. His shoulders sagged further at the rebuke. He had come to dominate, but instead he was being disciplined in front of a nation. The gavel's echo lingered, a cruel reminder that the balance of power had shifted. Jasmine inclined her head, a gesture of acknowledgement, then rose taller than she had all day. Her voice rang across the chamber, clear and unshakable. "We are not here to witness a performance," she declared, every word booming like a drumbeat. "We are here to protect the right to vote for the American people, and today the truth has spoken." Her tone was sharp, her cadence unyielding, her presence filling the room like a storm finally breaking. The words carried beyond the chamber, destined for headlines, destined for history. Barron could only sit in silence, trapped in the role he had written for himself. The eruption was immediate. Applause thundered through the hearing room, crashing like a wave against stone walls. The gallery rose halfway to their feet, hands striking together with the intensity of release. Reporters shouted over the noise cameras, flared like lightning storms. The Democratic side of the dais was alive with approval, faces alight with vindication. On the Republican benches, silence reigned. Some averted their eyes from the cameras, others folded their hands tightly, pretending to scribble notes. Their stillness was louder than the applause. They knew the damage was irreversible. Barron sank deeper into his chair, his body folding into itself. The weight of humiliation pressed down until his posture was slouched, beaten, unrecognizable from the proud figure who had walked in earlier. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the desk, but the fight was gone. This was not just a momentary stumble, it was the bitter taste of defeat, sharp and undeniable, burned into his first appearance on the national stage. The microphones, the cameras, the roaring applause, all of it conspired to etch the memory forever. Barron Trump had come to claim dominance, but instead he sat exposed, humbled and undone. And the chamber knew it, a debut meant to crown him had become a fall no one would forget. The applause had barely faded inside the hearing room when the outside world erupted. Within minutes, the clip of Jasmine standing tall, her voice booming as she cut Barron off, hit the internet like a lightning strike. The line was unforgettable. "You have interrupted me 6 times. It is time you learned what the word respect means." Social media feeds exploded, clips shared thousands of times within the first hour. The video was sliced into short reels, blasted onto TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Everywhere you looked, the confrontation burned bright, impossible to ignore. The hearing was over in Washington, but online it had just begun. Memes came first, fast and relentless. Someone looped her words over pounding bass and turned it into a viral dance track. Others added dramatic sound effects, thunderclaps, explosions timed perfectly with the slam of her folder. The phrase "learn respect" flashed across images of Barron frozen mid-smirk, his stunned face instantly immortalized as political comedy. GIFs of Jasmine raising her folder ricocheted across group chats. By morning, her words were more than a rebuttal. They were cultural currency, remixed, reimagined, and repeated in every corner of the internet. But the impact wasn't just entertainment. Law schools seized on the moment with startling speed. Professors uploaded the clip to their lectures, telling students, "This is how you shift power in a hostile room." Workshops on debate and trial advocacy dissected Jasmine's tone, her timing, the way she turned interruptions into ammunition. Women's leadership programs echoed the move, holding it up as a masterclass in refusing to be silenced. Young women replayed the video in dorm rooms and office lounges, repeating her line word for word like a mantra. It is time you learned what the word respect means. Voting rights groups wasted no time either. They cut together Jasmine's confrontation with stark footage of shuttered polling stations and long lines outside minority precincts. A campaign launched overnight with a slogan stamped across banners and feeds: "Truth is stronger than interruption." The clip wasn't just a moment of defiance anymore. It was the spearhead of a movement. Donations surged, volunteers signed up in droves, and hashtags tied to voting access trended alongside Jasmine's name. The political earthquake Barron had set off by interrupting her had turned into a tsunami crashing over him. And at the heart of it was a message that resonated deeper than memes or headlines. Jasmine's stand made something crystal clear. Democracy is not a family heirloom to be handed down from one dynasty to the next. It is not the privilege of a famous name or the property of a wealthy few. It belongs to the people, every voter, every voice, every citizen who steps into a polling booth. That truth, spoken under blazing lights in a congressional hearing, now echoed worldwide. For millions watching their phones light up with Jasmine's words, the meaning was undeniable. Democracy is not theater, not performance, not dynasty. It is the unshakable right of the people. And in that moment, the truth had finally spoken louder than power. The storm of applause and viral reaction was only the beginning. In classrooms across the country, teachers wheeled in projectors or pressed play on laptops. The clip of Jasmine locking eyes with Barron and demanding evidence became more than a headline. It became a lesson. "Watch closely," one teacher told a room full of students, the screen frozen on Barron's stammering face. "This is the difference between evidence and excuse." The students leaned forward, eyes fixed, as Jasmine's voice thundered through the speakers. "I asked for evidence, not talking points." The room erupted in whispers, and suddenly civics was alive, real and urgent. Essays were assigned on how facts stand against rhetoric, how power crumbles when challenged by proof. In debate clubs, Jasmine's performance was studied like a playbook, her timing and tone dissected line by line. Outside the classrooms, the reaction in communities was visceral. In Black neighborhoods and Latino districts and immigrant communities that had felt the sting of voter suppression, the clip was shared with pride. Elders who had marched for the right to vote saw in Jasmine a torchbearer of their fight. Mothers called her a shield of justice. Fathers told their children to remember her name. For once, people who often felt invisible watched someone stand on the floor of Congress and defend their ballot with fire and precision. At barbershops and church halls, her words were replayed over phones, each repetition sparking nods of recognition and bursts of applause. For those long denied respect, Jasmine's defiance felt like a victory of their own. Even within Republican circles, the fallout was undeniable. Conservative strategists whispered to reporters that Barron had miscalculated badly. He had treated Jasmine as a rookie, a stepping stone, assuming interruption and swagger would carry him as it had others. Instead, he had handed her the spotlight and been dismantled in it. Behind closed doors, GOP lawmakers admitted the mistake. He had underestimated his opponent, and the cameras had immortalized his failure. Some avoided comment altogether, retreating into silence, rather than defend a strategy that had backfired so spectacularly. Barron's first political debut was now a case study in how arrogance can sabotage ambition. Meanwhile, Jasmine's rise was unstoppable. She was no longer just a congresswoman from Texas. She was a symbol, a model of strength that transcended party lines. Young women saw her and felt possibility crack open in front of them. "If she can stand against the weight of a dynasty, so can I," one student wrote on social media. In think tanks and leadership workshops, her name was invoked as proof that power does not belong to those who shout the loudest, but to those who come armed with truth. The sight of a young woman cutting through bluster with evidence became iconic, a reminder that in politics, courage and preparation can be sharper than legacy. What began as a clash in a hearing room had transformed into something larger. Jasmine Crockett was no longer just defending voting rights. She had become a living example of how truth wielded with precision could shift the balance of power. The hearing was over, but its shock waves ripped through Washington like an aftershock that refused to fade. In the halls of Congress, the impact was immediate. The committee, embarrassed by the spectacle of endless interruptions, moved quickly to adjust its rules. From now on, repeated disruptions would be limited, and every member would be given a fair chance to speak without being drowned out. What had once been considered political theater was now recognized as an abusive process. Behind closed doors, aides whispered that it was Jasmine who had forced their hand. She had held up a mirror to the ugliness, and the chamber had no choice but to change. Other lawmakers took note. Watching Jasmine turn relentless interruptions into a devastating counterattack became a lesson for all of them. Freshman representatives who once trembled at the idea of facing seasoned political predators began preparing differently. They studied their cases like lawyers heading into trial. They rehearsed scenarios where they would be cut off, interrupted, ridiculed. And when they walked into hearings, they carried not just facts, but strategies ready to flip aggression back onto the aggressor. A new phrase circulated in staff briefings, the Crockett method. It was shorthand for standing tall, staying calm, and then striking with precision when the opponent least expected it. The media world devoured the moment with equal intensity. The clip of Jasmine halting Barron with her thunderous line, "You have interrupted me 6 times. It is time you learn what the word respect means," wasn't just viral, it was historic. Universities across the country rushed to include it in their curricula. In political science classes, professors called it a textbook example of reversal tactics, showing students how power could flip in an instant when evidence collided with arrogance. In communications programs, the confrontation was dissected, frame by frame, her voice projection, her posture, the timing of her words. One analyst on national television summed it up perfectly. This wasn't just a rebuttal, it was tactical judo using the opponent's force against him. Experts coined the term inverse strategy or the counterstrike effect. They explained it in op-eds and primetime segments. Jasmine had turned the very weapon Barron tried to use, interruption, into the trigger for his downfall. What was meant to silence her instead amplified her. What was designed to make her stumble instead gave her the platform to demolish him. It was more than politics. It was a communication strategy now studied like military doctrine. Journalists across the world replayed it. Foreign parliaments took note, and suddenly a single exchange in an American committee room became global training material. But the ripples weren't confined to politics and media. They seeped into the fabric of everyday life. Ordinary citizens watched the clip on their phones and felt something stir inside them. For years, many had grown cynical, convinced that truth was powerless against the machinery of money and legacy. But Jasmine's performance rekindled that faith. People shared the clip not just for entertainment, but because it proved something fundamental. Preparation and courage still mattered. One viewer wrote online, "For once, the truth didn't get drowned out. It stood its ground and it won." Minority communities, long bruised by voter suppression, felt the resonance most deeply. In churches, community centers, and barbershops, Jasmine's words replayed over speakers. She wasn't just another politician. She became a shield, a protector, someone who had stared down the arrogance of dynasty and spoken for the invisible. "She's our shield of justice," an elderly voter in Houston told a local news crew. For communities often treated as footnotes in the democratic process, Jasmine wasn't a distant figure in Washington. She was proof that their voices mattered. Her defense of the ballot became their victory too. Even among Republicans, grudging acknowledgement surfaced. Strategists admitted, sometimes anonymously, that Barron had picked the wrong tactic. He had walked into the room confident he could bulldoze a first-term congresswoman, only to find himself on the receiving end of a political masterclass. Commentators on conservative networks tried to spin it, but cracks showed. One veteran GOP staffer was quoted, "He underestimated her, plain and simple. He gave her the fight she wanted, and she destroyed him with it." The dynasty name that once carried an aura of invincibility had instead been reduced to silence in front of flashing cameras. In the weeks that followed, Jasmine herself transformed from rising star to icon. She became a model for what was possible when preparation met principle. Young women saw her and felt emboldened. If she can stand against that name, against that power, why can't I, a college student, posted on TikTok, her face lit by the glow of Jasmine's viral clip? Leadership seminars placed her story on the first page of their material, describing her as the embodiment of turning truth into the strongest weapon. Articles flooded in from women's organizations, declaring Jasmine showed us that you don't need legacy when you have facts. The story reached deeper into education, embedding itself in the lessons of a new generation. In high schools, civics teachers paused their planned lectures to play the confrontation for their classes. They asked students to identify the moment the balance shifted, to debate why evidence carried more weight than bluster. In debate clubs, kids role-played the hearing, some taking Jasmine's side, others playing Barron. They learned firsthand how interruptions, when handled with poise, could be flipped into opportunities. In college debate tournaments, the Jasmine Barron hearing became a standard case study analyzed for tactics, timing, and psychological power. The ripple spread further still. Workshops on media literacy showcased the clip as a way to differentiate between substance and spectacle. Students practiced separating fact from theater evidence from empty rhetoric. Professors told their classes, this is democracy at work, not in abstract textbooks, but in living color. The confrontation became not just a political moment, but an educational tool, shaping how the next generation would see truth, power, and accountability. Through it all, a singular human message pulsed. Power built on family name, wealth, or arrogance is fragile when stacked against truth. Money can buy advertisements. Legacy can command headlines. Swagger can intimidate in the short term. But as Jasmine had shown, none of it can withstand cold, hard preparation, steady conviction, and faith in justice. Dynasty can't silence democracy, one activist declared at a rally, holding up a sign with Jasmine's face emblazoned on it. The crowd roared in agreement. In the end, Jasmine's stand became something more than her victory. It was a symbol. It told the country that democracy does not belong to the children of the powerful. It does not bend to smirks or interruptions. It belongs to the people who show up, who speak truth, who refuse to be intimidated. The clip that spread across the world wasn't just evidence of one woman winning a fight in a congressional hearing. It was proof of something larger, that when armed with truth, even the smallest voice can shake the tallest towers of arrogance. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.